that I'm going to be getting my PhD. I'm actually entering into that program in the fall. And I always say that sometimes people ask me, why did you choose to go into the field of nutrition? And I always say, I don't think I chose it, it chose me. So I have a little bit of a story to share. I grew up overweight. I started gaining weight when I was 9 years old. And by the time I was in high school, I was technically classified as obese. I stand 4'10" tall. I have a petite body frame. And by the time I was 19 years old, I weighed 180 pounds. And then going into my early 20s, I got up to 205 pounds. And then I just kept going. In my 20s, I did a lot of different types of dieting. But, once I got out of high school and got onto my own, I went back and forth between just eating uncontrollably whatever I wanted and then going on diets to try to get rid of that weight. And so it was just like the cycle of up and down, up and down. And then when I was getting into my 30s, I was sort of finishing up my bachelor's degree. I was sort of a late bloomer for college. I didn't even start till I was 26. And a lot of times I say that was actually a blessing to me as I look back on it, because I was more mature and I was able to kind of assert myself a little more than I think I would have done if I had gone when I was younger. But when I was in college and I was getting, I was about a year out from graduating. And at that time, I was majoring in chemistry and environmental science. And my passion and my desire for when I was going to finish my degree was I really kind of wanted to clean up the world. I was really passionate about environmentalism, recycling. I was on the recycling club in college, and I really had a passion for that. And yet I realized I couldn't even clean up my own life. I was a pack-a-day smoker. I was 100 pounds overweight. And for whatever reason, I didn't really understand why that was. Like, I mean, I knew I had a pattern. I knew I wasn't, that started in my early life. But I could never figure out really what to do. The diets just didn't seem to work. They worked for a little while, but then I would just try to eat normally like everybody else around me. And it didn't really ever seem to be something that I could do, and that would be helpful to me. And so here I am in college. I'm majoring in environmental studies and chemistry, and I got a job as an intern, sort of like an intern, although I was actually getting paid, working at an environmental testing laboratory. And I was really excited to be doing that, but at the time I was tipping the scales at 210 pounds and, and just kind of like not really happy about it, but I just sort of living my life and not really having much of a vision for ever really having any change in that. But at my job at the lab, I was working in environmental laboratory. So my job was to test water and soil and air samples for environmental pollutants. And so I was learning all the names of the chemicals that we used in the lab, and we had a lot of different reagents. And one night I was, learning all of that, and then I was home one night, whipping up my favorite indulgence at the time, which was angel food cake mix from a box. And by the way, let me just bring up my PowerPoint now and share this, because I have a slide here that I can share with you. I realize I got a little bit ahead of myself here, but I'll come back to that. Let me share the slide though. That was me at the time. This was in the late 1980s. And so I'm at home and I'm making this cake, and I had never at that time in the late 80s, early 90s, I never really paid much attention to the ingredients on the box. But that night I did, for whatever reason, my eyes were drawn to look at that. And so as I skimmed past the sugar and the flour, my eyes fell upon these three words that I never expected to see in my food. And the three words were sodium lauryl sulfate. And that I realized that was actually one of the chemicals that I was using in my work at the lab, was actually a degreaser. And I couldn't, at that time, I didn't understand why, how could a degreaser that I use in my lab be an ingredient in my food? It just didn't make any sense to me. But that, looking at that and having that realization just sort of had an impact on me. And it really, when I look back, it really changed the course of my career, and it changed the course of my life, because I started to really have an understanding. Maybe it's all the chemicals in the food that I'm eating. Maybe it's not so much that I can't stick to a diet. Maybe it's that these chemicals are having some type of a biochemical impact that is making it so that it's harder for me to sustain. And so that was really what I started to look at. And from there, I always say it changed the course of my life, because from there I really started learning. And at that time I was still getting my degree in environmental science and chemistry, and then I graduated. And even after I graduated and started working, in the lab as my career, I started to, it's almost like I started moonlighting almost immediately after getting my career going, because I then wanted to learn about nutrition. It was almost like I almost did a 180 on it. But what ended up happening was I started to really learn, and one of the things that I decided to do was really look at the role of food in the human story. So it wasn't necessarily the conventional approach. I wasn't really looking at calories in, calories out, although I know that that's an important factor. And I wasn't even necessarily looking at it as dieting, but really more about what was it that people ate in the past that allowed them to be healthy. And obviously, human beings have been on the planet for so many thousands of years, so they must have been doing something right for most of that time. And so that's kind of really where I turned my direction. I turned my direction to looking backward rather than looking at what currently was considered to be the way to get to be healthy. Because really all I could see was, at that time, it was fat-free foods, it was sugar-free foods, it was TV dinners, it was frozen foods, it was, canned, packaged everything. And there wasn't really a whole lot of focus back then on eating healthy. This was back in by this point it was, early 90s. So I kind of took that and really started to change the way that I was eating. I realized, you know what? Whenever I went on diets in the past, it wasn't because I couldn't do the diet. It was because I was trying to just eat less of the same chemical laden foods that I had been eating. And what if I just actually really changed what I eat? What if I started eating fruits and vegetables instead of, fat-free, or sugar-free cookies? And so that's what I started doing. And within a year, I had lost 100 pounds, which in my adult life, it was the first time that I had ever been at a normal size, because I had started gaining weight as a child. So it was all sort of new territory for me. And then it just turned really into a passion. I really wanted to learn more. And more than that, I realized that I really want to help others with the things that I was learning and the experience that I was having with it. I just wanted to share that information with others. And so it eventually led me to do that. I remember I started out doing little free seminars in health food stores. And a woman came up to me after one of my talks and she said, "You need to put all of that in a book." And so I did. I wrote my first book because of that prompting. And it kind of just took off from there. So So now I'm here doing this class with all of you and excited